Thagard Baptist Church this morning. Hope to be an encouragement to you and to just challenge you with what the Lord's doing in Brazil, maybe give you a view of what the Lord's doing there and what our burden is specifically. We've been in Brazil now for 9 years. June will be 9 years. So this is our second furlough, and we are planning on going back to Brazil in August 8th. We have tickets to return for our third term there in southern Brazil. We work with the Gauchos. This is a picture of our prayer card. I'll just quickly go through the names of the children, and then you'll see them throughout the slides. Our oldest is Mordecai. Mordecai is 11. And then we have Micaiah. Micaiah is 10. Mariah, our oldest daughter, is 8. And then Nathan Jr., he is 7. And then the twins are Isaac and Mercy, and they're 5. And so that is the ring family. We don't have a 3-ring circus, we have a 6-ring circus, okay? So I just want to share a little bit of background. I grew up in Brazil. My parents have been missionaries in Brazil for over 30 years, and so they went way back the same area amongst the Gaucho people, the cowboys of southern Brazil. We're way down south. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but down near the Argentina-Uruguayan border of Brazil. And so I grew up on the mission field of Brazil. My wife is from the area, from Southern Pines. She's an Ingram. Some of you may know some of the Ingrams, but she grew up here in the area. We met at Bob Jones University. Both of us attended there. I studied for the ministry, and she got her elementary education degree there. And the Lord just bonded us together. We actually came to know each other because of our local church that we're sent out of in South Carolina, Fellowship Baptist Church. But we were married in 2010 in September, and the Lord just directed us in that way and just made it clear that He wanted us to serve Him together. And we began praying at that point, what would the Lord want us to do? I don't know if you ever thought about how does a person get from sitting in the pew to the mission field? How does that work? Well, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but just kind of share a little bit about our situation. We were actively involved in our local church, soul winning, children's ministry, Sunday school teaching, just in all these different ways, and just praying the Lord would direct us. And it was back in 2011, right after we'd been married about a year or so, I was teaching through the book of Titus. And Titus chapter 1 and verse 5, Paul told Titus to set in order the things that were wanting and ordain elders in every city. And as I would read that passage, I don't know if this has ever happened to you before, but as I would read that passage, the Lord would bring back in my mind's eye a picture of a little leather map of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, which is the southernmost state of Brazil. And it was like the Lord would just keep burdening my heart, There are things that still need to be set in order. There's still a need to spread the gospel, to establish churches in that southern part of Brazil. So we took our burden to our pastor at the time, Pastor Bryce Hager, and to the deacons, and then eventually to the church. And in 2012, at the end of the year, the church voted to send us out directly out of the church. So we are sent out of Fellowship Baptist Church. It's our home church, but it's also our clearinghouse or our sending agency, if you will. We're one of 5 church planners that have been sent out directly of the church. So when we went to Brazil, that was 2014, after we raised our support. You can see the picture there with the totes, and I always tell my kids we swapped out totes for kids. So we went from less kids to more, but we're thankful for each and every one of them and the part that they play in our ministry. It really is a family ministry, a family endeavor. And here's a picture, kind of give you an idea where we are. Brazil is as long as the States is wide. Okay, so where I'm at, to go to the Amazon, which is up at the tip top of Brazil, would be like driving from here at Yates over to California. That's pretty much it. That's the distance we're talking about. So very huge country. And our region of Brazil, once again, is known for the Gauchos. The capital city there of the state is called Porto Alegre. Porto Alegre is a city of just under 2 million people. In the greater area, we're talking about almost 4 million people with all the cities that kind of pile up around there. It's a very large metropolitan area, and that is where we live and where we work. So the Gauchos, you think, well, these are Gauchos, these are like cowboys out in the field. Well, yes and no. So we're in an urban area, and anybody born in the state of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil is called a gaucho, okay? So they could be a lawyer, they could be a doctor, they could be a construction worker, or they could be a rancher, cowboy out on the farm and so forth. It's just the terminology that's used there, but it does have its roots in the cowboys, okay? That is where the gaucho originated, those men out on the pampas, out on the fields with their cattle and all of that. And so we've got the Brazilian steakhouses. Some of you may be familiar with that. That came out of our area, you know, the big beef, and they're real big into agricultural endeavors in our part of the country. And then the city itself is urban. It is you know, it's a modern city, if you will. Definitely doesn't have a third world feel to it. So where our church is at is on the outskirts of this town. So we just had the road in front of our church got asphalted while I've been on furlough, which for us is a huge blessing because we depend on bus service. And so the buses in the rainy season, they can't really get through the ruts on the dirt roads. So we got asphalt. So all that to say, we have the urban, we're an hour and a half from the city center, the skyscrapers and everything, but our part of the city is on the outskirts of town. That's where we've been ministering since 2014. Started out as a Bible study on Mother's Day. So coming up in 2 weeks, we'll celebrate 8 years, 2015, when the church actually established. We put the sign out, Biblical Faith Baptist Church, Igreja Batista da Fé Bíblica, and we started having church services officially then, 2015, on Mother's Day. So this is just a look at the inside. The Lord provided a dance hall for us, and we converted it, and you can see the transformation to the auditorium that we have today. We're thankful the Lord's provided that location for the church there. These are some pictures of the ministry. We are very much given to the idea that the local church is how you do ministry. So everything funnels through the local church in a lot of different endeavors, from children's ministries to trying to do English and other outreaches, adult Bible studies, and of course your preaching services and one-on-one, door-to-door, these kind of ministries, but all trying to bring things back into the local church. Here are some pictures of folks there in the ministry of the church, a Biblical Faith Baptist Church, just different folks that the Lord has allowed us to rub shoulders with, and I'll share some specific stories with you coming up. One of the things in Brazil that's interesting is once you pass 9-seater vehicle, you have to have a CDL. So a 15-passenger van like the church has out there, you'd have to have a CDL for that. And with our family growing, and we got twins at the end, we outgrew our 7-seater vehicle. And in order to have a vehicle big enough for the family and big enough to actually give rides, I had to go to school in Brazil, get a CDL. And that van right there is the van the Lord provided for us. It's just kind of a unique story. I think I've shared with some of you, but I want to encourage you that oftentimes things don't make sense, but God's working. And what happened with this van, because I had twins and I had to go get a CDL, and because I got a CDL, I needed a bigger van, and I only had a little bit of funds. We only had a little bit of money, and so we're praying and where we're going to go, and a man in our church says, I know a man who sells vans. Let's go to see him. And when we got there, the owner, we didn't know right where the house was, so we show up this house. They got vans out front and everything, and the man says, oh, no, you're talking about so-and-so. He lives up the road. So we're at the wrong house. He's like, but what do you want him for? And we told him, well, we're looking for a vehicle. He said, well, I got this one right here. It was the exact amount of money that I had. So I went to the wrong house, and the Lord directed us to this van. And the Lord does that, you know. He does that often. And this van, I'll share some more about how the Lord used it specifically. But that picture there, the funnel picture, that's the van full of kids, packed full. We bring them to Sunday school, to VBS, to different children's outreaches. My kids always want me to share that Brazil has Children's Day. And so you got Father's Day, Mother's Day, and Children's Day. And the children love that because you get one more day to get presents and stuff. So we do Children's Day activities and such. But really the focus is the gospel. The gospel is the hope that you share with kids. We feed them, we help them where we can in a social way, but the important thing is that they hear of Jesus Christ. So here's our Sunday school in the back of our building, and you see the mask there. We dealt with all the things related to COVID and mask up till July of last year. That was a mask required in public in Brazil. But the Lord really allowed us through this time to continue ministering, especially to the children in our community. We also work through soccer. Soccer's a big deal in Brazil, so we reach out to the boys that way in our church. And specifically, here are 3 young men. The 2 in the back, to your left is Andre, and to your right would be Wellington, the 2 in the blue standing in the back. These young men, they come by themselves to church. Their parents don't come. And in fact, one of the young men, his dad is actively involved in spirit worship and stuff, and so he comes to church and his dad's doing all that stuff at home. So you can imagine what, the challenge that's there, and yet he comes faithfully. He's been coming for probably 5 or 6 years to the church, and just a blessing to see how the Lord is working him. But we're praying for young men. You need men everywhere, but the hope of any work or any ministry is that the young men would grow up in the gospel and would follow the Lord and share it. So these are 2 young men. They actually, the 2 in the back, they actually ride their bikes to church sometimes, when they can't catch a ride. So grateful for them. Our ministry to our children. Missionaries have families. We have our children. I'm grateful our oldest 4 have made professions of faith, and the oldest 3 have follow the Lord in believers' baptism. But that's a burden that my wife and I have, is for our children. And so we ask people to pray for us. But that my wife, going back this year, in the fall, all 6 of our children will be homeschooled. So she has a room off the back of our house, and it's the 1-room schoolhouse. So you can pray for her. That's a full-time job besides housekeeping and being a church planter's wife. And so this is a big part of our ministry there as well. But we're thankful for our children, and they do open doors. Children attract children, and our children have had opportunities to be a witness to there in Brazil. Here are some people specifically I just want to share with you that the Lord's allowed us to touch their lives. The young man standing beside me, his name's Edson, and he got hit by a drunk driver, and he lost the movement on his right arm and his right leg, and yet he still comes with a smile on his face, and you ask him about it, and it's been difficult. His wife left him over this whole situation, but yet one of the things that I think is interesting is you talk to him about it, and he'll say, you know what, it's just such a blessing. The accident, it paralyzed and messed up my right side, but I'm left-handed. So there's always a positive. You can look at things. In the middle picture, the 2 young ladies there, the blonde, Vanessa, she lost both of her parents to COVID, and that's how we met her, was dealing with and trying to encourage her through that time, and she came to know Christ as Savior, and so we're thankful the Lord worked there. And then the other young lady, Nyada, came out of a rough background. We have in our area where we're at, even though it's outskirts of town and doesn't have as much of an urban feel, we have a lot of drugs and prostitution and crime and cars that get stolen in the city, they drop off and burn in our area, all this kind of stuff. And so she comes out of a rough background like that. But as we talk about the children, really for them to get out of that lifestyle, they need Christ. Because the easiest way for them to make money is right there in the crime. And so they see their adult siblings going into that, and their parents and everything. And so one of our burdens as we share the gospel is that they would see Christ and see hope in Christ, and that would turn them away from those types of activities. The last couple on the far right, holding up the heart, that was our Valentine's banquet. In Brazil, they don't have Valentine's on February, it's in June. But at any rate, that's a picture of Fernando and Maria Elena, and that's another couple the Lord's allowed us to minister. Maria Elena works in a assisted living, and she's gotten us in to be able to share the gospel in her assisted living with the folks there, and so it's a blessing as well. These are folks that have followed the Lord in believers' baptism. One of the biggest blessings of a missionary or a pastor or any church is to see folks not just get saved, but commit to Christ publicly. To follow the Lord in believers' baptism. That doesn't have anything to do with salvation, but that's a testimony of their commitment to follow Christ. And often it's a big hurdle in church planning where we're at to see someone get saved and want to follow the Lord in believers' baptism. That's a big deal. This is a picture of folks that were baptized on our last term, most of them in the last 1.5 years, 2 years. But it's just a blessing. Once again, here's our van. Several of the people in that previous picture were from this mechanic shop. Now, what happened with the van after I purchased